would like to take you through a series of rites to illustrate the life cycle in Hinduism, what are commonly called the rites of passage or transition rites that mark the advancement of an individual from one important stage of his life to another higher stage. In classical Hinduism, there are a great many such rites, from the conception on through death and beyond, 16 or more milestones in an individual's life. These essentially are the Vedic rites known as the sanskaras. They have prefigurations in the Rig Veda and Atharva Veda, the ancient texts of India, and some aspects or symbols of these rites might be traced back even to Proto-Indo-European times. However, it is in the Griya Sutras, about 500 BC, that we find the first elaboration and discussion systematically of these rites of sanskaras. In contemporary India, many of the rites have undergone modifications and regional variations. Some have gone out of common practice. Most have devolved upon the highest class, the Brahmanas, for their preservation. However, the remarkable thing is the homogeneity that one finds observing these rites throughout the length and breadth of India. The elements give us a strong continuity through these rites. Fire is found in almost all of the sanskaras, and offerings into the fire marks the closure of each rite. The elements of water and earth also are recognized in each. The basic foods, the substance upon which man depends, provide another thread. These are domestic rites, although sometimes parts or all of them can be performed in temples. Usually it is in the home, and it is the father or father-to-be who is the priest, his own priest, in the ceremonies. Brahmana guests are invited to the rites, and the feeding of these brahmanas at the end of the rite is a common practice. But the father or father-to-be has a ritual preparation for each. He sips water, and he undergoes the yogic breath control. He orients himself in time and in space. He performs his intention to do this rite. The rites of sanskaras can be understood in 4 different categories: the rites of birth and of childhood, the rite of initiation into the community, the rite of marriage, and the death rites. We are going to explore the rite of the birth ceremony, the initial one being the garbhadhana, the conception of a child. The ancient texts tell us that the final act of the marriage is that of conception on the 4th night. This is followed by the pumsavana, the generation of a male, which occurs in the 3rd month of pregnancy. A female child is, of course, entirely desirable, but it is important to have a son, for each family must have the son perform the ancestral offerings, the shraddha rites. And this rite then involves the feeding of the mother-to-be by her husband of 2 beans and a barley grain in curds, or, as is more commonly done, the oil pressed from a banyan seed is mixed with special berries and pressed into the right nostril of the wife by the husband. In the 4th or a later month of the pregnancy comes the simantanayana, the rite of the upward parting of the hair of the mother-to-be. This also is done by the husband. He stands behind his wife and with a porcupine quill traces up the body of the wife and then parts her hair backwards with the quill. Then he does the same thing with a stalk of kusha grass and then again with a full spindle. This is to protect the child in the womb and assure a safe delivery. Then he has his wife look into a bowl of rice to see their child to be. He whispers mantras, and the rite is concluded, and the rite of birth subsequent to that is the Jata Karma rite. This has two stages. First, there is the Medajanana, the rite to produce wisdom, instill knowledge, intuitive wisdom in the child. And this occurs before the umbilical cord is cut and is followed by the whispering of the name of the goddess speech, Vak, 3 times into the right ear of the newly born infant. Then the umbilical cord is cut and the child undergoes the Ayushya ceremony, the production of long life. A secret name known only to the parents is given to the baby and he is installed then at the mother's breast. It is upon the 10th day, or sometimes the 12th day, that the actual name-giving ceremony, the Namakarana, is performed. This is done as a kind of closure to the period of ritual defilement of the household and the mother. The mother has been confined to her chamber for those 10 or 12 days, the 10 days of the lunar regeneration cycle of a human, the 12 days of symbolic year. The ordinary household fire has been extinguished and a special ritual fire has been maintained. Also, in each of those 10 days or 12 days, there has been an offering of sesame seeds and rice. And that now with the name-giving, this is a completed stage for the child. He has made it thus far. The mother is pure, the house may receive guests, and that is the end of that ceremony. In the 4th month of his life, there is the Nishkramana, the first going outside of the house to see the sun and also to see the moon. Then 3 months later, in the 7th month of his life, comes the ear-boring ceremony, the Karnavedha. For girls, this is performed with the left ear first. For boys, it is the right ear first. And a tiny gold ring then is inserted in the ear lobe. We're going to look now at the first feeding rite, the first time that the baby will receive the solid food, usually a mixture of rice and ghee and milk. This is performed in the 6th month usually, and it is more important for the first offspring, although succeeding children may very well perform the same rite. We're going to go to a village some 30 miles from Benares in Uttar Pradesh in North India and observe this rite there. We see the walls protecting the village from a distance, and we enter hearing the sound of the band playing for the ceremony of Anaprashana, the rite of first feeding solid food. The band has been playing in the morning outside the village, entertaining the villagers, but the ceremony itself will be performed in the house of the grandfather, a Brahmana landlord who is a leader of the village. And it is he who takes the major role here rather than the 18-year-old father. We see a ritual mandapa, a tiny one having been constructed in the house here with the installation of Agni and Gauri and Ganesha outside of it. The baby has a cord tied to its wrist by the grandfather, and then he is dressed by the grandmother, the barber's wife, and other women. And the grandfather now puts the first food into the baby's mouth, and everyone watches intently to see his expression, because this is an auspicious moment. Then the father comes forward, and he ties a red cord upon the right wrist of the baby. And now the ceremony is completed with fire offerings and a puja to Lord Vishnu, and people retire during the heat of the day. Late that night, the entire village is entertained in a great tent, as a prostitute has been hired from Benares to sing and dance, as only prostitutes or transvestites may do publicly. And she treats the little baby here in the midnight hour as a royal patron, and the courtesan is flirting with the little boy. Now, another rite that takes place in childhood is that of the first tonsure. This usually occurs in the 3rd year for a boy, and in modern India it is mostly Brahmana males who undergo this first haircut, the shaving of the head and leaving only the chuda, for this is the chudakarana, and it is performed to leave the top knot, the Brahmanical sign. We go to the temple in Benares of the goddess of smallpox, Shitalamata, where unusually a girl is going to have the chudakarana performed. At the same time, her little brother will be shaved in the ancestral temple of Kali in a village from which the family had come. Now the girl's shoulder-length hair is cut by the barber. The mother and aunts of the girl are about her, and the barber's mother is directing the rite. First, she loses her hair to the scissors and then to the razor, until she is entirely shaved except for the little chuda in the back of her head. Then she is bathed and receives new clothes. Her toes are painted the auspicious red color, and the pujari or temple attendant steps forward to paint upon her head the swastika, the symbol of well-being, which swasti means in Sanskrit. Now the mother goes forward to the pujari and has him make her offering to the goddess figure in the background. And that day's activities are complete as they were for the little 3-year-old boy. But on the following day, both children, the boy and his sister, come to this same temple for a reshaving process, much to the agony of the little boy, who feels that one shaving of the head was sufficient. And following that, the offerings again are made to the goddess, and here we have the little girl in the arms of her mother, the little boy in the arms of his grandmother. And we can observe the distance between the generations, the grandmother keeping her head veiled according to tradition, the younger mother, being a university student in the city, has her head unveiled. There are other rites of childhood. For instance, a boy at the time of the first shaving of his facial hair undergoes a sanskara at the age of 16 and has his shaving and then his head retonsured as well, marking the shedding of the impurities, the defilements represented by the hair in both cases of tonsure that belong to childhood. But we are going to look now at the initiation ceremony, the very important rite which promotes a boy in modern India, although ancient India had the rite also for girls, from his childhood to that of full participation in the religious community, being the first time that he will hear the Vedic mantras recited, and being the first time that he is taught to perform the rites, the offerings into the fire. For a Brahmana boy, this traditionally was 8 years old, and the age varied somewhat for the other classes, being 11 and 12 for Kshatriyas and Vaisyas. In modern India, this really has become more of a symbolic rite and is often performed just prior to the marriage ceremony, as we shall see is the case here. We go to a village outside Benares to see this rite performed, a village about 30 miles south, and the boy is undergoing the Upanayana ceremony, literally the leading near his teacher, for he is a brahmacharin, a Vedic student, one who goes according to Brahman. And he now is allied to a guru, a teacher, one who literally is heavy, is pregnant with this boy, being his spiritual father, being one who gives over to him his entire knowledge. The boy, in his turn, should live, according to the texts, for 12 years with this guru, providing for his physical needs by tending his cattle, by collecting wood, creating his fires, begging, and so forth. This is, of course, a symbolic rite that is performed in one day only, but we will understand the continuity with the details of the ancient tradition. Here we have the boy eating in a line of brahmanas, performing a vow that he has undertaken for the Upanayana ceremony. The priest who is going to run the ceremony sits in front of the altar and has kindled the first of his 3 ritual fires and is preparing a substance upon that fire. The ritual scene itself is in a mandapa inside the boy's home, a ritual enclosure with a sacred tree and a pot representing the goddess Gauri in front of it. In the foreground, close to the 3 altar fires, are some wooden implements which are quite remarkable for their antiquity. These are some 3,000 years old in design. Simple ritual implements of wood, this one to hold the water for the offerings, another one for the ghee, the clarified butter, ladles to offer these substances into the fire. The boy undergoes his ritual tonsure, a symbolic clipping of the hair. Then he is dressed in a new yellow loincloth, and he takes his seat beside the executive priest here, who holds the sacred thread. And now this thread is placed upon his left shoulder in the act of yajñopavita, the investiture with the sacred thread, and this thread he will wear then for the rest of his life. Now the boy undergoes the succeeding moments of the ceremony. He takes on the deer skin. He stands now in the ritual position here with his father beside him in the dark vest, standing over the guru. The guru recites the proper mantras as the boy receives his danda, his staff, which represents his cattle prod outwardly, but also is a symbol of the sacred tree in the center of the world, the pole that connects heaven and earth, and represents his own power of regeneration and fertility. Now he looks at the sun. The mantras are recited for this occasion. And then he sits down again to be instructed in the offering of the ghee into the fire, his first homa offering. He steps forward to worship his guru with a garland and an auspicious forehead mark. And then the guru comes to the most important part of the ceremony, and that is the recitation of the first mantra the boy will hear, the first Vedic text. And they are shielded from the group to hear the Gayatri mantra from Rigveda 3:62:10, Tatsa Viturvaraniyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Na Prachodayat. This the boy will recite every day the rest of his life in his morning devotions. The rite now concludes at this point with the Medajanana, the reinforcement of the installation of wisdom in the boy, which first was performed the day he was born. Now he does the salutation to the rishis, the ancient seers of the Rigveda, and the boy goes on a symbolic alms-begging tour among the women, including his mother, to gain food and coins for his guru. Then he comes back for the second part of the ceremony as the second fire is kindled, and that is the Vedarambha, the educational process in which the priest teaches him to write on a board with red and yellow paste. He then learns the mudras, the gestures that should accompany each of his Vedic recitations. And after the third fire is kindled and offerings are made, he goes to take his bath, looking rather disconsolate because he must do this, according to local custom, in the company of 8 women. Now he performs Samavartana, the return to his village from the traditional 12-year period of education. And having taken his bath, he is known as a snataka, one who has bathed, and has now come back to fit into the society as a householder. He receives all of the perfumes and ointments of which he has been deprived during this period of celibacy that he has observed. He looks at his new image in the mirror for the first time, and in his new clothes he is outfitted, but then decides to escape, to run off to Benares and become an ascetic. He is dissuaded, however, by his uncle, and now is told that he must accept his role as a householder, a grihasta, and become a husband and father and responsible member of the community. And so he sits down, the rite of Upanayana having been completed for him. This leads us to discuss the rite of marriage. which ordinarily would succeed the rite of initiation. The marriage rite takes place usually for a Brahmana boy at the age of 24, sometime after his Vedic education, and the bride ideally would be 8 years old. These ages vary a great deal through the periods of ancient and medieval and modern India. In this case, we are going to observe in the vivaha, the marriage rite, that the children are both the same age. They are both 12 years of age. But before we look at the marriage of the boy who underwent the upanayana, I would like to show you some indication of the preliminaries that a bride undergoes. This is the worship of the goddess Gauri, which the bride has undertaken for many weeks prior to the marriage ceremony. And now, as the marriage draws near, she is worshipped by the family priest, and then by the relatives of the family, and then, in an extraordinary rite, she is anointed with turmeric paste, a bright yellow paste, all over her body by 5 Brahmana women. And then she is fit for the marriage rite. We now return to the boy of the initiation rite who takes his last meal with his mother, sitting covered with her sari over his head. This is the leave-taking ceremony, as he will no longer be a part of her household. He will be now a full adult male. He takes the remnants of his food out behind the house, still covered by that sari, and buries them to avoid the presence of the evil eye, lest the rite be interrupted. Then there is a band and processional that comes to the house of the groom, bearing the parched grain that will be used in the ceremony that night. This is brought into the house, and the mother of the groom waves her grindstone over it, accepting it for ritual use. The boy is bathed and then clothed and decorated for the ceremony. His feet are painted the auspicious red. His mother is now comforted by her brother over the loss of her son, and the groom's party now is ready to proceed. The groom himself and his parents in a hired car, everyone else on carts or on foot, some 15 miles to the village of the bride that we see in the distance, crossing over a river with goat herds here, up the road into the village, where the bride's father has made in readiness a welcoming party for some hundreds of guests on the groom's side. It's almost an invading party here in North India, the groom's party being the dominant side. The groom and his little brother are treated royally in this palanquin as they are brought now in a parade into the village, the whole processional passing through a very narrow opening in the wall of the village. There they are received by the bride's father, and the groom steps out in full regalia and is worshipped in the rite of Madhuparka, the worship of the groom by the bride's father. All the while, the village is entertained by a number of musical instruments and by the hejra, transvestites, these men who dress and dance and sing as women, and the bands playing about them. Also, outside the village, there is a great tent erected, for over 1,000 people have come from different villages to watch the performances at night of actors from Benares as they act out the Mahabharata. Now, in the actual ceremony, only the family is present in the small room of the bride's house, and the bride's father lays out the dowry. The bride arrives heavily veiled here with her sari and is worshipped by her brother with a fruit. The groom enters and takes his place, and the bride sits upon the lap of her father as literally she is given away from her father's loins. The reciting of the mantras goes on as the two touch hands, and then they hear late into the night the recitation of the ancestral lineages, the class and caste and clans, and many offerings are made. Finally, we come to the rite in which the parched grain is brought forward by the brother of the bride and placed upon her hands under her sari, where it spills out onto the floor, and she steps upon it, The mantra is being recited, stressing her fertility and her powers as a mother-to-be. Then she is directed to stand upon a grindstone, this being the rite of Ashmarohana. And she stresses now her fidelity, her unswerving loyalty to her husband, unchanging as the stone. From there she takes 7 steps, the Saptapadi, northward from the fire, and the rite is concluded by the Sinduradana, the painting by the groom of a red mark on the hair parting of his new bride. Now the two sit down and consent for a wedding photo, the bride taking away her veil after the men have left the room. And the following day, in the heat of the day, is passed by musical entertainment or sleep. And again, at sundown, the party invades the bride's village, the procession back in through the narrow opening to argue out the dowry for the groom from the bride's father. Everyone is entertained that night by the prostitutes and actors in the great tent. In the morning it is all taken down and the rite of marriage has been concluded. We have now come full cycle, observing this newly married pair who, after their schooling is completed, will no doubt take up residence in the groom's village in the home of his father, there to perform the final act of the marriage rite, the conception, garbhadhana, the conception of a new being who in turn will live out his own life cycle. We have not mentioned one of the sanskaras, and that is the final rite of passage, death. The rites of cremation and the rites known as shraddhas that go on later to promote an individual from death on the journey to rebirth are very complicated and deserve a special presentation in themselves. That will be death and rebirth in Hinduism.